Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. Filled it back up, tamped the soil down, and stomped over it to ensure it was secure. Then, they scattered the excess dirt, gathered some dry loose soil from elsewhere, and covered the damp soil with it to make it blend in with the surroundings. After completing all this, they returned to the tunnel, grabbed the buckets, and headed to the Jiang reservoir to fetch water. Once all 10 buckets were filled, they went back into the tunnel and sealed the entrance. With that, all their outdoor tasks were finished. By this time, the sky was finally starting to darken. Phew. Luzin exhaled lightly and chuckled. What a nerve-wracking day. When we were running around out there before we found this hidden shelter, I wasn't nearly as worried. Yao Wei nodded, feeling the same way. But they both knew exactly why. Back when they were wandering outside, they were on their own. They moved as they pleased, constantly searching for supplies. They had nothing to lose. When you have nothing, you fear nothing. But now, they had this place. They planned to stay here for a while. If someone discovered it, their secret base would be compromised. It was only when you had something to care about that you started to fear losing it. But thankfully, once the hole was sealed, no outsiders, lacking new human strength or dogs' scanning capabilities, could find a weak spot to break in. This place was absolutely secure. At this moment, Luzin felt a deep, indescribable sense of peace. Let's go. He stuffed the drone and its remote control into a backpack specifically meant for carrying them, grabbed 2 buckets, and spoke. Yao Wei picked up 2 buckets as well. On the way back to the shelter, neither of them spoke. Yao Wei was wondering what Luzin planned to do with these buckets. Now that they were filled with water, he still hadn't said anything. How long was he going to keep her in suspense? Maybe she should just ask. Keeping the question bottled up inside was frustrating. But why didn't she feel like asking anymore? That was strange. Meanwhile, Luzin was thinking that next time they went to fetch water, they should bring Dog along. Unfortunately, Dog's scanning range wasn't very wide. It was useful for preliminary scouting, but as a defensive radar for continuous area monitoring, it wasn't as effective. If only Dog could fly like a drone and get a complete view of the surroundings. That thought hit Luzin like a jolt. He suddenly remembered the glowing light in Dog's eyes when Luoping had taken out the drone. Dog's eyes didn't flash easily. It must have detected something. Was there something on the drone that reacted with Dog? Could Dog possibly attach the drone's propellers to itself? Luzin felt like he was getting a little carried away with his imagination. After 5 trips, hauling back all the buckets, Luzin headed straight to the monitoring room at the far end of the shelter. Yao Wei had no idea what he was up to, but she followed along anyway. Inside the monitoring room, Dog was hanging from the electrical panel, with black wires extending from its body, connected to the circuit. Luzin ordered Dog to disconnect from the circuit and come down. The moment Dog unplugged itself, the shelter fell back into darkness. Only the glow from Dog's eyes remained. Luzin pulled the drone and its remote control out of his backpack and asked, "Earlier, when we were in the car, which one did you react to?" Dog's eyes immediately shone onto the remote control. Then, both Luzin and Yao Wei heard a sharp click coming from Dog's head. Under the faint glow from Dog's eyes, they saw a panel on its head pop open, revealing a slot. The slot's structure was intricate. Metal vertical teeth lined the bottom, while tiny protrusions emerged from the sides, their function unknown. Yao Wei was utterly confused, but Luzin suddenly understood. He told Yao Wei and Dog to follow him out of the monitoring room, heading to the outermost rest area. There, he found Yao Wei's toolbox, grabbed a screwdriver, and opened up the drone's remote control. Inside, the structure was simple. Just a chip, circuits, a battery slot, and a screen. Dog's eyes immediately locked onto the chip. With such an obvious clue, Luzin didn't hesitate. The chip was smaller than the slot, so it would definitely fit. Carefully, Luzin removed the chip and inserted it into Dog's slot. The vertical teeth inside the slot immediately clamped onto the chip, while the protrusions on the sides moved into place, attaching themselves to it. Click. The panel on Dog's head snapped shut. Chapter 33, Dog's new component. Yao stared intently at Dog, eager to see what other amazing abilities it had. Meanwhile, Luzin had already turned his attention to the drone. The slot on top of the mechanical dog's head was indeed unexpected. But by now, Luzin was no stranger to Dog surprising him. Like when it restored power to the villa. So at this point, he wasn't even fazed anymore. The slot on the mechanical dog's head seemed to be able to automatically match different chip models, with high compatibility. Now that Dog had installed the chip from the remote control into its head, Luzin didn't even need to think to understand what Dog was about to do with the drone. "Come on, show me." He gave Dog a command. But the mechanical dog didn't execute it immediately. Instead, it lifted its wheel-equipped leg and tapped the drone, then tapped Luzin. Only then did Luzin realize. When he had returned earlier, he had turned off the drone to conserve power. Now, the drone was still switched off, yet he had asked Dog to control it, which was indeed a bit unfair to Dog. He picked up the drone, turned on the switch, and placed it back down. Dog's eyes gleamed, and it finally carried out Luzin's command. Buzz. The drone's 4 propellers spun rapidly, lifting the machine swiftly into the air, where it hovered. It worked. Luzin was overjoyed. This new function of Dog was amazing. With this, the drone had essentially become Dog's accessory, solving the issue of Dog not being able to fly and scout its surroundings. By having Dog control the drone, Luzin was freed from having to stare at the screen of the remote control constantly. And if there was any danger, Dog could stay hidden. Even if the drone got spotted and attacked, at worst, it would only lose an accessory, rather than Dog itself suffering damage. This was fantastic. By now, Dog wasn't just a tool for Luzin. It was his lifeline, and in this harsh world, his only companion as he trudged forward alone. Though, most of the time, he still treated Dog as a tool. Either way, if Dog could help him while staying safer, that was the best outcome. Not only did safety improve, but its functionality had also evolved. Go under the table and come back. Circle the pillar in a twist pattern and return. Stick close to the ceiling for a moment. Check if the kitchen at the far end is safe. Luzin issued a series of commands to Dog. The drone zipped under the table one moment, then flew around a support pillar in the rest area in an S-shaped trajectory the next, following every command flawlessly. Finally, it flew into the kitchen, then back, hovering in front of Dog. Watching Dog control the drone with such precision, Luzin grinned in satisfaction. Way better than the two of us controlling it. He turned to Yao. Yeah. Yao nodded. Dog was truly impressive. She had tried using the remote control before but could never get the drone to fly properly. Yet Dog had done it so perfectly, far better than she could. Alright, go turn the power on. Luzin issued another command, and Dog sped off to the surveillance room, reconnecting the circuits. The corridor lights flickered back on. Luzin returned to the dormitory, found an electrical outlet, and flipped open the slot on the drone, pulling out the plug to insert it into the socket. He had noticed earlier that there was a battery compartment at the bottom of the drone, with a plug slot right next to it. Opening it allowed the plug to be removed without needing an external power adapter. This saved him the trouble of looking for extra accessories. The red indicator light on the battery compartment lit up, showing that the drone was now charging. In anyone else's hands, this thing would just be a disposable tool with limited uses. But in Luzin's hands, it was entirely different. With the mechanical dog around, he could recharge the drone anytime. Now that the remote control's chip had been removed and inserted into Dog's head, the remote control's functionality had been completely transferred to Dog. This meant Luzin no longer had to worry about the remote's battery running out. Previously, Awoping had even given Luzin 4 extra batteries, but now they weren't needed at all. Still, he stored them away. Who knew when they might come in handy? If nothing else, he could even throw them as hidden weapons in a pinch. Luzin also removed the batteries from the drone's remote control and set them aside. Then, he examined the screen still attached to the casing and sighed. Shame. Dog can integrate chips but doesn't seem to be able to use this screen. He muttered as he dismantled the remote casing, preserving the small rectangular screen along with its wiring. It was still a resource and could still be used as a hidden weapon. And in the future, if the opportunity arose, he might even attach it to Dog, allowing them to see what the drone captured when it flew. It wasn't heavy or bulky. He might as well keep it. No need to look. Dog can confirm any danger. Yao remarked. She had already understood the significance of Dog being linked to the drone. Luzin glanced at Yao. This woman really treated Dog as if it were its actual name. Then again, he had never given Dog a proper name. He had always just called it that. So in a way, Dog was indeed its name. That worked just fine. Today, Dog was officially named Dog. Let's go. We'll carry all the water to the bathroom, then take 2 buckets to the kitchen for cooking." With that, Luzin left the bedroom, picked up 2 buckets of water, and placed them in the bathroom. Yao Wei suddenly recalled that Luzin had cut himself off mid-sentence earlier. But since he showed no intention of explaining, she didn't ask, simply following him to carry the remaining water buckets. The kitchen lights worked fine and turned on without issue. With dog restoring the power, the cold storage also regained its cooling function. Though it wasn't as strong as before, at least it was usable. Still, Luzin turned the cooling function off. All the food inside was vacuum sealed, and they wouldn't be staying here for long. There was no need to waste power on refrigeration. Constant temperature changes weren't ideal anyway. They had already eaten meat in the morning, so for this meal, Luzin didn't use any sausages. Instead, he opened a pack of dehydrated vegetables, boiled them in water, added a bit of oil, soy sauce, and salt, and cooked some rice. 2 simple dishes to go with their meal. The cooked rice carried its natural sweet aroma, and the seasoned vegetable soup was just as delicious. For Luzin and Yao Wei, this was a truly satisfying meal. The meal used up half a bucket of water. After they finished eating, Luzin luxuriously used the remaining half bucket to wash all the pots and dishes before carrying the empty bucket to the bathroom. Since Yao Wei couldn't cook, she helped wash the dishes and then followed Luzin. She figured that now, Luzin should finally get around to doing what he had planned earlier. If he didn't, she would make sure he did. Chapter 34, Comfort and Indifference. When they reached the bathroom door, Luzin said to Yao Wei, "Could you grab a pair of scissors? I remember you have some in your toolbox." "Okay." Yao Wei agreed and went to get the scissors. By the time she returned with them, Luzin was already inside the bathroom. The bathroom light was on, and Luzin had flipped an empty bucket upside down on the floor. He was crouching there, examining the bottom of the bucket. Yao Wei handed the scissors over. Luzin reached out to take them, then opened them, gripping just one of the blades. He held it up to his eye, inspecting it closely. Yao Wei was puzzled. From the way Luzin was handling the scissors, it seemed like he wanted to use the blade itself. But didn't he also have a dagger? Why not just use the dagger? Why specifically ask for scissors? Luzin seemed to guess her thoughts and explained, "The tip of my dagger isn't as narrow as these scissors, so it's harder to control. Actually, these scissors aren't ideal either. If I had an awl or something similar, that would be perfect." Unfortunately, he didn't. So he had to make do with the scissors. Both the scissors and the dagger were sharp, but beyond the tip, the dagger's blade widened quickly, while the scissors had a gradual taper. Luzin took a deep breath, then stabbed the bottom of the bucket lightly with the scissors. Just a quick touch-and-go motion. A tiny hole appeared in the bottom of the bucket. If he had used a dagger or misjudged his force, the hole would have been much bigger. Too big, and it would be hard to control the water flow. Stab, 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 stab. His hands moved swiftly, the scissors working like a blur. The bathroom echoed with the sound of thud, 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 thud as he poked a series of tiny holes in the bucket's bottom, making Yao Wei wince a little. She didn't understand what Luzin was doing, but it seemed like he had just ruined a perfectly good bucket. A total waste. But the bucket's perforated bottom now somewhat resembled the showerhead in the bathroom stall. The shelter's water supply system had long since broken down, so the showerhead had been useless. Because of that, neither Luzin nor Yao Wei had paid any attention to it before. But now, connecting the dots, Yao Wei suddenly realized what Luzin was trying to do. "Could you bring me a bucket of water?" Luzin asked as he carried the empty bucket into the stall. The showerhead was fixed to the wall, made of metal, and looked sturdy enough. The top part holding the showerhead extended out at a right angle, without any curve, making it convenient for hanging things. But he had to test it first. Once Yao Wei brought a bucket of water, Luzin gave a light jump and hung the bucket onto the showerhead. Not bad. It held up. The materials used in this shelter were really solid. He observed it for a while, watching as the bucket swayed before coming to a stop. The showerhead remained completely unbent or damaged. Satisfied, Luzin turned around and asked, "You first, or me?" "You first," Yao Wei said as she walked out. Luzin chuckled and followed, heading to the nearest dormitory to grab a pillowcase to use as a towel. He had actually taken a proper shower just a few days ago. Back in Villa number 272 in Jianghe District, Yubai City. The water supply there had still been functioning, much to his surprise, allowing him to clean up thoroughly. But that didn't stop him from wanting to bathe again now. Nothing compared to the feeling of diving into bed all fresh and clean. This was a rare chance. He wasn't going to pass it up. Once they left this place, who knew when he'd get another opportunity like this? He stripped off his clothes, hung them by the door, took the empty bucket down, poured water from another bucket into it, then hung it back up. Some water was inevitably wasted in the process, but that was fine. When he had punched holes in the bucket earlier, he had been careful not to make them too big. So even with a little wastage, it wouldn't be too much. The small but steady stream of water was just enough for him to finish washing before the bucket emptied completely. As the icy water hit his skin, Luzin shivered. If this had been his past life, he wouldn't have been able to handle such cold water. But now, this felt amazing. Coming from the freezing outdoors, enduring sudden weather changes time and again, he had long grown accustomed to the cold. Water splashed down, and he enjoyed the refreshing sensation, even rinsing his hair. Only when the water finally ran dry did he grab the pillowcase and dry himself off. Now that his skin was exposed to the air, he actually felt warm and refreshed. Comfortable. Luzin happily pulled on his clothes and ran outside. Yao wasn't in the corridor. When he returned to their shared dormitory, he saw her sitting on the bed, eyes closed, as if meditating. "You look like you're practicing some martial arts. Why don't you sit cross-legged while you're at it?" he quipped. Yao seemed not to get the joke and simply glanced at him. Luzin continued, "I'm done. Your turn. You can grab a pillowcase from the top bunk to use as a towel." "Okay." Yao understood that part. She got up, took a pillowcase from the upper bunk, and headed out. As she reached the doorway, Luzin reminded her again, "Make sure you wash properly. If one bucket isn't enough, use another. We're right next to the reservoir. We can get more water anytime." "Okay." She replied once more, disappearing out the door. As soon as she left, Luzin quickly stripped off his clothes, placing them on the bed above his chosen sleeping spot. Then, he grabbed a blanket from the top bunk, lay down, wrapped himself up. Cold. Comfortable. Yao finished in the time it took for one bucket of water to run out. She was still reluctant to waste water. But since they weren't using soap or other bath products, she hadn't really needed that much water anyway. When Yao returned, her short damp hair clung to her cheek. Luzin couldn't help but glance at her a few more times. He hadn't expected that this usually sharp and fierce woman would, in this moment, unintentionally exude such an alluring charm. But Yao, under Luzin's gaze, didn't show a hint of shyness. She simply looked at him calmly and asked, "Do you want the lights off?" "No need. Once you lie down, I'll call Dog over." Luzin replied. "Okay." Yao nodded, walked over to her bed, glanced at the top of Luzin's bed, and asked, "You stripped?" "Yeah, I told you, this is the best way to sleep. When you have the chance to enjoy something without worrying about danger, you should take full advantage of it." "Okay." Yao nodded again, then, without hesitation, pulled off her tight-fitting tank top. Luzin's eyes widened. This woman didn't follow the script at all. Shirt, pants, socks. She followed Luzin's example, neatly placing them on the bed above hers. Then she grabbed a blanket from the top bunk, climbed into bed, and wrapped herself up just like he had. Yao lay there silently, eyes open, as if testing whether this was actually comfortable. Watching her, Luzin, who had just enjoyed a full view of her well-toned curves, suddenly felt a twinge of guilt. He sighed and asked, "Earlier, when you saw that manga, why did you suddenly throw it away?" Yao knew which book Luzin was referring to. Her expression suddenly changed, becoming somewhat unnatural. She was silent for a moment before saying, "I don't know." "Didn't know? Was that just an instinctive reaction?" Luzin said, "Take a look at that book when you have time." Yao, "Then throw it to me." Luzin. So she had noticed that he had left the book at the bedside earlier. Feigning indifference, he tossed the book over. Yao caught it, opened it, and started reading. The more she read, the more her expression changed. Her gaze occasionally flicked toward Luzin, seemingly with a hint of hostility. Luzin tensed up and said, "That's why you should be more mindful in the future. Unless you're willing to get as intimate with me as they do in the book, it's best not to undress in front of me." Smack. The book was thrown back at him. Wrapped in her blanket, Yao turned over, showing him the back of her head. But at least she didn't explode. Luzin was slightly relieved, but at the same time, he felt a faint sense of disappointment. "Dog!" he called out. "BZZ." The lights went out. Dog had arrived. Chapter 35, You two. No matter what, Luzin had a very comfortable sleep. Since arriving in this apocalypse, it was the first time he had slept so peacefully and comfortably. The soft blanket absorbed his body heat, returning warmth to him, making him drift into deep sleep without even dreaming. The powerless shelter was pitch dark, with no sunlight filtering in, making it impossible to distinguish between day and night. When he woke up, he first listened carefully to the breathing sounds from the opposite bed. Once he noticed a change in the rhythm and confirmed that Yao was also awake, he asked Dog, "Dog, is it morning?" To be honest, he wasn't sure if the mechanical dog could answer this question. Previously, he had always relied on his own eyes to judge whether it was morning or not. He had never asked nor needed to ask Dog. But now, he had no choice but to rely on Dog. Because he didn't have a watch. Fortunately, Dog responded quickly. The mechanical dog, which had been in its box form beside the bed, instantly returned to its usual shape, and its dog eyes lit up. According to the preset rules Luzin had programmed, Dog's eyes shining steadily meant yes, blinking once meant no, and continuous flashing meant unable to determine. Essentially, I can't do that, my lord. Right now, Dog's eyes were shining steadily, illuminating the entire dormitory brightly. Luzin confirmed. It was already daytime outside the shelter. Nice, another new function discovered for Dog. Yao had also opened her eyes. Under the glow of Dog's eyes, her pupils reflected the light, making them sparkle in a dazzling way. She lay on her side on the bed, watching Dog. Noticing Luzin's gaze, she then turned to look at him but didn't say anything. Her expression was normal, as if she had completely forgotten what had happened last night or the book she had read. How do you feel? Luzin asked. Yao nodded in satisfaction, indicating she felt great. For her, this was a new experience, something she had never encountered before. Luzin suddenly thought of a question and asked, "Did I snore?" Yao shook her head and surprisingly asked back, "What about me?" Luzin laughed, "Of course not. Just by looking at you, I can tell you're not someone who snores." Yao replied, "You too." Luzin was in a great mood. "Oh, you're too kind." Yao, "You too." Luzin wasn't sure if Yao understood that too kind was actually a compliment, but he was still in high spirits. Not just because of Yao's words, but also because of the peaceful and comfortable environment they were in. "Shall we keep sleeping?" Luzin suggested, "since we don't have anything to do in the shelter for now." "Okay." Yao nodded again, agreeing that Luzin's suggestion was a good idea. So Luzin commanded the mechanical dog, "Dog, lights off, rest." Dog immediately followed the command. Its eyes dimmed, and in the darkness, a soft shifting sound was heard. Luzin didn't need to look to know that Dog had returned to its box form. Back to sleep. This time, he slept deeply and soundly. When Luzin woke up again, he suddenly noticed that the breathing sounds beside him were gone. Not even the faintest sound. He was startled and quickly called out, "Dog." The mechanical dog immediately transformed from a box back into its usual form, lighting up its eyes. Under the glow, Luzin anxiously looked toward Yao's bed, only to see that the blanket was lifted, and the bed was empty. Looking up at the top bunk, Yao's other clothes were gone, leaving only the red leather jacket. So she had gone out. Luzin let out a breath of relief. As long as she was out, and not still lying there, breathless. He got dressed, got up, and walked out of the dormitory. The sound of wind whooshing reached his ears from not far away. The wind was sharp and heavy, as if something was striking the air at high speed. Using the light from Dog's eyes, which had followed him out, Luzin looked over and saw that the tables in the rest area had been moved to the edges, leaving a large open space in the center. Yao was standing in that empty space, throwing punches and kicking her legs one after another. So she was working out. Curious, Luzin had Dog restore power to the shelter while he stood there watching. Yao noticed his gaze but didn't stop. She continued throwing punch after punch, kick after kick. Her movements were sharp and fast, cutting through the air so quickly that it was hard to follow them. Only after images could be seen. Luzin was amazed, realizing that he could never achieve such speed, but as he watched, he felt a bit disappointed. "What's wrong?" Yao finally stopped, seemingly having picked up on the emotions in Luzin's gaze and cared enough to ask. Luzin smiled, "I thought you were training something like the dragon-subduing palm, the soul-destroying palm, or at least Zimiai, Tongbai, Tai Chi, or Wing Chun." But what he saw was simply Yao practicing punches and kicks, making them strong and fast enough that she no longer needed any techniques. At the end of the day, she was relying on the natural gifts of new humans. Raw power creating miracles. It seemed that martial arts might not exist in this world after all. Yao frowned slightly, not quite understanding. Luzin just smiled again, "Never mind, I was just talking about some nonsense from old stories. There's no need to care about things that don't exist. Come to think of it, if martial arts did exist, strong enough to break the limits of new humans, and yet neither he nor Yao had learned such skills, wouldn't that be bad?" "Oh." Yao responded, not pressing further. She resumed training. Punch, 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 kick, kick, kick. Luzin watched for a while, then joined her, throwing his own punches and kicks, using all his strength, trying to break his limits. It was time to put in the effort. This was no longer the north where he had come from. More and more people were showing up. And most of them were not good people. He couldn't keep being a laid-back drifter, just traveling and scavenge for supplies. He had to make his body stronger, more resistant to injury and exhaustion, so he could better face this world and protect himself. How did you get so good at shooting? As he punched, he casually asked Yao. Shooting people. Picking up bullets. Yao didn't mind talking to Luzin. Their physical strength was enough to keep their breathing steady while throwing full-force punches without running out of breath. But Luzin fell silent when he heard her answer. So Yao became an expert marksman by using live targets, huh? And it wasn't just that. She had to be lucky enough that after each kill, she could collect enough bullets for the next fight. How was he supposed to learn that? His luck was pretty good, but the problem was, he had already shot quite a few people, yet his aim hadn't improved at all. Chapter 36. This isn't the end. The two of them trained for a long time. Luzin didn't feel too tired, but his stomach was completely empty. He was getting hungry. So he stopped and asked Yao, are you going to keep going? I'm hungry. How about I go make something to eat? Yao paused and thought for a moment, then asked, can you cook? I want to train a bit more. I won't be able to in a couple of days. Luzin didn't think much of it, assuming she meant they'd be leaving the shelter in a few days to continue their journey. He thought to himself, this woman's really putting in the work. But that was a good thing. Yao growing stronger meant their lives would be safer. At least, that's how it would be until they eventually parted ways. His current combat skills and shooting weren't on par with Yao's, so handling the logistics and support wasn't a bad role for him. Let her get stronger first, and then he'd slowly grow under her protection. Alright, you keep going. Luzin said, heading alone to the kitchen. Thinking about how they'd be leaving in a few days, he actually felt a bit reluctant. Honestly, the place had plenty of supplies, and with Dog around to help, water and electricity weren't an issue. If he just settled down here, he could probably ride out who knew how many years in peace. For a moment, Luzin really wanted to just stay. Let the wind and rain rage outside. He'd just hole up in the shelter and live his little life in peace. Wouldn't that be great? But thinking it through, no matter how many years passed, the supplies would eventually run out. If he stayed, he'd just be draining what they had day by day, getting by. And if he really stopped here, the determination he once had to find a place where he could truly survive for the long haul would slowly wear away. When that time came, and the shelter's resources were gone, would he still have the courage to step out and hit the road again? This was only a temporary refuge, not the end of the road. Luzin took a deep breath and reminded himself to stay focused. He absolutely couldn't waver. In 2 days, they had to leave. No second thoughts. For breakfast, he still cooked rice and soaked some dehydrated vegetables for soup. But this time, Luzin had a new idea. He made more rice, soaked more veggies, and scooped some out to the side. After the food was ready, he called Yao over. When she saw the extra portions, she felt a bit bad, thinking she'd just eat it all in one go and skip the next meal. Luzin quickly stopped her. Don't rush. That's for the next meal. I made extra on purpose. So we can stir-fry it later and switch it up a bit. Only then did Yao relax. When she heard the word stir-fry, she immediately remembered that stir-fried river shrimp dish Luzin made back when they were out there. She swallowed without realizing. Stir-fried food. Probably tasted better than plain boiled dishes, right? She couldn't help but look forward to the next meal. That next meal wasn't guaranteed to happen at dinner, though. They'd taken a nap earlier, and now it was hard to tell what time it was. Between eating, bathing, and other daily water use, they'd gone through 5 barrels of water. So after a bit, they went out to the reservoir to restock. There were 3 barrels left. Not bad, still enough to last a while. But both Luzin and Yao knew they had to refill frequently to keep their water supply steady. The weather outside was unpredictable. Who knew when a cold snap might come and freeze the reservoir? If the ice was thin, they could just break it, but if it froze thick, they'd have to haul the ice back and melt it, which would be a pain. In that case, they could only hope for snow. Collecting snow and melting it was a lot easier than chopping ice from the river. They originally had 10 buckets. One of them had been made into a shower with a sprinkler head by Luzin. So now they just needed to bring back 6 buckets. 3 each. They called Dog over when they were getting water, and had it send out the drone to scout. It was way more efficient than them doing it manually. After the drone confirmed the area was safe, Luzin and Yao went out with the buckets. The sun was already in the western sky. It should be afternoon. But the problem was, they'd just eaten not long ago. By the time evening rolled around, they probably wouldn't be very hungry. That meant they couldn't have dinner like usual, just before nightfall. Maybe by the time they wanted to eat, it'd already be the next day. With no natural light in the shelter and no accurate timekeeping tools, they couldn't plan their lives around regular daily routines. Luzin even went to check that computer in the outbuilding office. Turns out, the thing didn't even have a clock. Who designed that? It was just more proof that the shelter wasn't suitable for long-term living. This wasn't the end of the journey. Just a rest stop along the way. Luzin and Yao tried to make their time in the shelter meaningful. Getting enough rest, making time for training, and treating it as a kind of entertainment. When they got hungry from the workouts, Luzin went to make another meal. He took the leftover rice and the now expanded vegetables from the previous meal and stir-fried them together. With oil and salt, and a good stir in the flat-bottomed pan, the food came out way better than plain boiled dishes and rice. Yao ate with great appetite, though Luzin still felt it was a bit of a pity. Too bad. No eggs. Otherwise, we wouldn't even need the veggies. What could beat a good egg fried rice made from leftovers? Too bad. No eggs. For the next meal, Luzin used sausages. Served cold. The one after that? Back to boiled veggies and rice. Then again, the leftover boiled veggies from last time got stir-fried and eaten with white rice. Then again, sausage slices, stir-fried. Then again, plain fried rice. Unknowingly, Luzin and Yao had already stayed here quite a while. They figured it must have been at least 3 days outside. Those locals who were staking out the road should have given up by now. So, Luzin and Yao began planning to pack up and move on. But just as they were discussing it, Luzin noticed Yao frowning, looking a little uncomfortable. He asked, "What's wrong?" "It's nothing." Yao said, "There are always a few days like this every month. I'll be fine once it passes. Let's pack and get ready to head out." Only then did Luzin suddenly realize something. "When you said you wouldn't be able to train in a couple of days. Was it because of this?" Yao nodded. "Yeah. Ah, that explains it." Chapter 37, Feels so good, will there be bleeding? Yes. So how do you deal with it? I can usually sense it beforehand and take care of it quickly. If I don't make it in time, I've got spare pants. I'll change and wash the dirty ones when I get a chance. Surviving in the apocalypse really is tough. Luzin took a close look at Yao's pants. They'd clearly been through a lot. Looked like there were some stained areas, but nothing too obvious. He'd always assumed those marks were from fights with people or wild animals, never imagining they were Yao's own. Yao always came off as strong and capable. With that much strength and skill, Luzin had almost thought new humans were postmenopausal warriors or something. After all, based on what he knew about new humans, everything about them had evolved to help them survive better in the apocalypse. And biological issues for women really were a major hurdle when trying to survive in such a harsh, resource-scarce world. But now, hearing Yao say that those inconvenient bodily functions still existed in her, despite her being a new human, he was genuinely surprised. Clearly, without anyone to guide her, Yao didn't fully understand her own condition. She'd just figured out some patterns on her own through years of being alone, and came up with simple coping strategies. But still, being able to predict her own cycle? That was pretty impressive. Maybe that was another special trait of new humans. The air suddenly turned cold. Luzin frowned and glanced toward the tunnel. Looked like another cold front had rolled in. Or maybe it had been here for a while and they were just now feeling it. After all, the basement did have some insulation. But even with that, if the cold outside got bad enough, it would still seep in eventually. The temperature outside could still affect the underground shelter. The shelter didn't have a heater or anything like an air conditioner. Too bad they couldn't bring in the one from the car. There was no place to install the external unit. So their only way to stay warm was wrapping up in blankets. Thankfully, the shelter had 10 dorms, 80 beds, and plenty of blankets. It's getting cold again. Why don't we stay here a few more days? Leave after you're feeling better, he suggested. Yao shook her head and calmly said, I'm fine. I can handle it. It won't affect anything. Luzin said, but what if it snows? We'll wait and see, Yao replied. She frowned slightly while talking, but quickly relaxed again like nothing had happened. Looked like she really was used to it. This kind of pain she could endure. Alright, let's go take a look first. Put your coat on, Luzin said as he added more layers himself. Yao responded and pulled her red leather jacket over her shoulders. Luzin glanced at her and suggested, want to wrap yourself in a blanket too? Yao nodded and actually did what he said, grabbing one of the blankets and wrapping herself in it. No reason not to. There were plenty here. The two of them left the shelter, walked through the tunnel, and felt the air growing colder and colder. When they reached the entrance, even though it was sealed tightly with no gaps for the wind to blow through, Luzin could still faintly feel a cold draft drifting in. They didn't call dog over this time. They were only checking if it was snowing. No need to send out the drone. If they really needed to leave, then they'd have dog send it out. Luzin moved a rock aside to open a small gap. Instantly, bright white light streamed in along with damp wind that hit them right away. Huge snowflakes were falling diagonally in the wind, quickly leaving a white layer on the stone at the entrance. Well, snow's blocking the door. Guess the heavens want us to stay put. Let's wait it out. Luzin smiled as he spoke, the breath from his mouth turning to white mist in the light spilling in. Yao had no objections. In this kind of weather, driving was dangerous. The car couldn't go fast and it would burn too much gas. Not a good idea to travel. Luzin resealed the tunnel entrance and said, "Come on, let's go warm up under the blankets." They headed back the way they came. Luzin said, "No idea how long this cold snap will last. Hopefully it's like last time. Short. But who could predict the weather? 10 days of freezing temps, even a whole month." Luzin had been through it before. Yao said, "If it lasts too long, we'll have to disconnect the wires from the car battery." Luzin understood what she meant. "You're talking about the battery cables, right? Don't worry. We'll check in a couple days, and if things are still like this, I'll handle it. You're not feeling well. Just stay in bed and rest. If the car sat idle too long in this kind of cold, the battery would drain fast. If they didn't disconnect the battery before that happened, they wouldn't be able to start the car later." "Okay." Yao didn't argue and agreed. After they got back to the shelter, the two of them gathered several blankets and brought them to their dorm room. Luzin waited outside and said, "Hurry up and take off your jacket. Get in the blankets." Yao responded, took off the red leather jacket, and crawled under the covers. With several blankets layered on, she finally started feeling comfortable. "All set." She called out to Luzin, then turned and noticed he was still standing at the door. Not getting into his own blankets. "You're not lying down?" she asked. Luzin said, "I'll wait a bit. You go ahead and lie down. I'll come over in a minute." "Oh." Yao was a little confused. No idea what he was up to. Luzin left the doorway after speaking. All she could do was lie there quietly and let her mind wander. There was a bit of discomfort under her, but it was fine. She'd long gotten used to this kind of moment. Just had to tough it out. The weight of all those blankets finally felt right. It was warm and cozy. Only her feet wouldn't warm up. If anything, they felt colder and colder. She curled her legs and tucked her feet up a little. That helped. For a while. But then they felt cold again. Just when she was about to curl up even more, she suddenly saw Luzin come back. Holding a bowl and 2 bottled water containers they used for storage. The bowl was hers, and it was steaming. The bottles, oddly, looked a bit dented. What had Luzin done? Yao was wondering, when she saw him set the bowl and one of the bottles on the table. Then he held up the other one and said, "Got you a little something." "What is it?" Yao didn't quite get it. Luzin seemed to be talking about the bottle, but how was that supposed to be a gift? Then she watched him walk over to her bed, grab a pillowcase from the top bunk, wrap the bottle in it, lift her blanket at the foot of the bed, and slip the bottle underneath. A burst of gentle heat instantly spread over her cold feet, driving away the chill. Yao immediately felt much better. "How is it?" Luzin asked with a smile. Yao nodded hard. It felt so good. Chapter 38, Keeping warm in the cold. Yao felt really good and comfortable, the warmth rising from her feet instantly easing her urgent need. But thinking about the crushed bottle, she felt a bit wasteful again. "Thanks. Just for this, the bottle got all squashed." Luzin smiled and said casually, "It's fine, just 2 bottles. I've saved up a lot more bottles, plenty to use. Besides, don't we still have the bucket? It's not a lot, but if we squeeze it in, it should hold." The water bucket needed to be placed on a flat surface and had to be filled, so it wasn't that easy to store it in the car already packed with supplies. Yao nodded at last and said. Luzin brought over a bowl and said, "Here, drink the rest of this hot water. After I filled the bottle, there was a bit left, perfect for you to drink." Yao shook her head. "I don't want to drink right now." "You have it." Luzin replied, "It'd be wasted on me. Drinking hot water during this time helps relieve the pain. If I'd known you were gonna have your period, I'd have made hot water for you sooner." Yao asked, "What period?" Luzin said, "What you're dealing with right now." "Oh." Yao blinked twice, showing an expression like she'd learned something new. Of course, what she really learned wasn't just those 2 words, but more importantly how to handle her current situation. She didn't know it was called that before. She didn't refuse again. She sat up and drank the hot water. A stream of heat flowed down her throat and into her belly, warm and comforting. It felt like it really did get a little better. Of course, it was just a bowl of water, not exactly a miracle cure. Yao's feeling was more psychological than physical. But in the days that followed, as Luzin boiled water for her every day, even warming the water for washing up, Yao genuinely started to feel much better. Her stomach didn't hurt as much anymore. She thought Luzin was really amazing, knowing everything. "How do you feel?" Luzin asked. "Pretty good," Yao said, handing the bowl back to Luzin. Luzin smiled, placed the bowl on the table, then crawled back into his own blanket. He'd made himself another hot water bottle, wrapped in a pillowcase, placed by his feet. When he got under the covers and pressed it with his foot, the warmth spread through his soles, then turned slightly scalding, making him shiver. "Nice." He let out a soft breath and tucked in tighter. Yao looked at him and, for some reason, started to laugh. The two shared a smile. Luzin called over Dog and turned off the light to sleep. In the days that followed, Luzin started boiling water frequently. Of course, Yao wasn't some delicate little flower. She refused to just lie in bed doing nothing, letting Luzin take care of everything. She still did what she could. Helping clean the dorm, boil water, cook meals. She learned from Luzin and picked up some basic cooking skills. These tasks weren't that hard for her. But when she tried to help wash the pots and dishes, Luzin stopped her. "You'll get blood clots from touching cold water during your period. That's why your stomach hurts. And you don't need hot water for washing dishes, so just leave it." That's what Luzin told her, even sighing. "If I'd known you'd be in this condition, I wouldn't have let you touch cold water earlier. Even before your period, cold water can lead to this." Yao nodded. "I'll be more careful next time." She believed in learning to handle things herself and didn't plan on relying entirely on Luzin in the future. But for now, the job of getting water still had to be left to Luzin. The cold spell lasted several days, and with snow outside, the temperature wouldn't rise, so the ice wouldn't melt. Going out meant facing cold and damp, which would easily lead to chills. So Luzin took over the task and even pried open the back wall of the neighboring building to access the car, lifted the hood, and used tools from Yao's toolbox to disconnect the battery cables. In the freezing cold, the water in the reservoir had turned to ice. Luzin didn't try to break the ice to fetch water. Too risky if the ice was thin, too much trouble if it was thick. Instead, he just collected snow from outside the door. Once melted, it filled their needs and was much easier. He even had Dog check it. This snow water was safe to drink, and of course usable for other purposes too. With snow and rivers outside, water was easy to get. It just meant more trips. Luzin didn't plan to short himself, so he gave himself the same treatment as Yao. Every time that warm water flowed down his throat, warming his belly, he couldn't help letting out a sigh. It felt amazing. In this world, they always had to save everything. He'd almost forgotten what that felt like. Being able to experience it again. It was great. Not only that, he even got a little indulgent, soaking his feet in hot water every day. There were still 9 buckets left anyway, and not all of them needed to be for drinking. He set aside 2 just for toilet flushing, filling hot water bottles, and foot soaks. He and Yao each had 1. They'd heat the water to just the right temperature, place the buckets by their beds, sit down, and soak their feet. The hot water wrapped around their feet and calves. The steam and the heat from their feet seemed to rise, warming their whole bodies, a lazy cozy feeling rushing to their heads. So good. "How is it?" he even asked Yao while soaking. Yao nodded, looking at her feet in the bucket, and said, Yao's special time only lasted 4 days, and she could sense when the bleeding would start and handled it beforehand. Luzin was sure that the new humans had enhancements in this area, though not complete. After 4 days, Yao was back at full power, and the shelter suddenly felt warmer too. The cold front outside had passed. They stayed for 2 more days, waiting for the ice and snow to melt before getting ready to leave. So they both knew these were their last days of comfort, and they kept spoiling themselves. Drinking hot water, soaking feet in hot water. But the hot water bottles in bed weren't needed anymore. At that point, they were just too hot. Sigh, sometimes I really want to stay here. Life is too cozy here. As they were about to leave, Luzin sighed and said. Yao pressed her lips together. You could stay. Her voice was low, as if she were saying something that went against her heart. Luzin picked up on it, glanced at her, and suddenly laughed. Not staying. What for? Supplies will run out eventually. Once that happens, and my will runs out too, I won't even survive out there. Then what? This place isn't an oasis. Come on, pack up. We're leaving. Yao nodded. She thought Luzin had a really clear head and made a lot of sense. Chapter 39, Sloppy Broll whopping their luggage, big and small, was brought to the tunnel entrance. Luzin and Yao each carried a bucket. They didn't just take one. They stacked the 2 buckets together, planning to use one normally, and if one broke, they'd have a spare. Also, once the supplies in the car were used up a bit, there'd be room to store the buckets. But more than that would be hard to carry, so they only brought 2. Dog had already disconnected the power circuits in the shelter and followed them. The drone's battery had been fully charged by Dog, and now, under its control, it flew out for a quick scan. Everything's clear outside, let's go. Once the mechanical dog's eyes lit up, Luzin confirmed it and helped Yahweh move the stones blocking the cave entrance. Once outside, they didn't rush to seal the entrance. Instead, they took down the back wall next to the cave, pulled out the car that had been parked in the house for so many days, loaded all the stuff onto it, and then sealed the cave entrance. They also sealed off the back wall of that house in the process. In this kind of world, you never know what'll happen. In case they needed to use this place again or hide the car, it was best to be cautious. After all that, Yahweh opened the car's hood and reconnected the battery cables. Luzin inserted the key and started the engine, confirmed everything was working fine, and they were ready to set off. First, they headed to the gas station east of Jajia village to top off the fuel, then resumed their journey. Luzin sat in the driver's seat. He would drive this time. After that last battle, the two had already developed some coordination. Luzin's shooting skills weren't great, but his driving was decent, so it made more sense for him to drive. The role of gunner in the front passenger seat was better left to Yahweh. Of course, they had to steer clear of Jajia village. Neither Luzin nor Yahweh wanted to run into the people holed up there again. Wonder how that sloppy bro is doing? It's been a while. He should have run off by now, right? As they passed through a side road, Luzin casually brought it up. That guy was the most memorable person Luzin had met in this world besides Yahweh. That flashy outfit and those sleazy lines. It was hard to forget him even if you tried. But the nickname was based on memories from his past life, so Yahweh didn't get it. Sloppy bro. You know, that Lwo. Lwo. Luzin couldn't recall Sloppy bro's full name for a moment. Yahweh remembered. Lwo King. She still didn't understand why Luzin called that guy Sloppy bro. She didn't think Lwo King was sloppy or bro-like at all. He looked older and greasier. How could someone that greasy ever be considered sharp? Oh right, Lwo King. Luzin said, he should have taken off. That sedan of his was fast. Those guys even wrecked a car trying to catch him. Probably couldn't keep up. Yahweh agreed. What he said made sense. But just as they said that, a faint voice suddenly drifted over. Big bro, big sis, help me. The voice was weak, like it came from far away. Even with their enhanced hearing as new humans, Luzin and Yahweh could only barely catch it. They exchanged a look, confirming they'd both heard it. It was that same voice, Sloppy bro Lwo King. Luzin stepped on the brake and made a snap decision. Looks like things didn't go the way we thought. Let's go check it out, see what's up with that guy. Maybe we can find out more about the current situation too. Okay. Yahweh agreed. But Luzin didn't drive over right away. He first had Dog send the drone for another sweep. Once it confirmed there were no threats, he shifted gears, stepped on the gas, and steered toward the drone's direction. Lwo King was lying about 200 meters ahead on the side of the small road. The terrain was slightly elevated, and tall weeds covered the ground. How they'd survive the freezing weather was anyone's guess. That guy was lying in the middle of the weeds, his figure hidden among them. From a distance, you couldn't spot him easily, but he could use the terrain to watch the road. Big bro, big sis, long time no see. I saw the car and knew it had to be you. Sure enough, you're the only good folks left in this place. As soon as he saw Luzin and Yahweh, he grinned wide. Luzin and Yahweh saw that his face was pale, lips were white, his sunglasses gone, a gash across his chest bleeding out, staining his coat completely red. His breath was faint, like he might die any second. Yet somehow, he was still smiling and talking. This guy had insane vitality. What the hell happened to you? Luzin got out, gun pointed at Lwo King, and asked. Lwo King didn't mind having a gun aimed at him. He answered, the county folks don't play fair. They teamed up with Liang Shui village. I've been hiding for days, and they still tracked me down and stole my car. I fought tooth and nail, nearly died a few times, but I took down a bunch of them. Even wiped out all the ones at that Jajia village base. But now I'm out of food. If I don't eat soon, I'm dead. Luzin was confused. What do you mean nearly died a few times? I'm a type B new human. Lwo King said urgently, big bro, big sis, can we talk about this later? If I don't get a bite to eat right now, I really won't make it. Luzin was a bit surprised. There were types of new humans? He thought they were all the same. He glanced at Yahweh and saw a flash of confusion in her eyes too. It seemed she didn't know about this either. From what Lwo King said, type B new humans seemed to have something to do with food. Luzin saw that Lwo King was barely hanging on, struggling just to speak, and decided to give him a shot. He went to the car, pulled out a pack of instant noodles from his bag, opened it, and asked while handing it over, "What other types of new humans are there?" "Thanks. Bro, you're the best." Luoping was overjoyed, still barely managing to talk, but quickly answered Luzin's question. "Since there's a Type B, there's gotta be Type A, Type C, and Type D too. I've never met any though, so I don't know what they're like. I only know I'm Type B because someone told me." Then Luzin broke off a piece of the noodle cake and tossed it to Luoping. "Luoping," Luzin said, "sorry, I don't have many left. Including this one, I've only got 4 packs." He split the remaining half in the bag and handed it to Yao. Yao didn't hesitate and took it. The two of them gnawed on the dry noodles while watching Luoping perform. Luoping twitched his mouth, forcing a smile. "It's fine. 1 bite is enough. At least I'll stay alive a little longer." As he spoke, he picked up the piece that landed on him and shoved it in his mouth. His cheeks puffed out as he chewed hard for a long time, finally swallowing it down. Then Luzin and Yao saw his head tilt, eyes close. Like he'd died. The two were full of question marks. But a few moments later, they watched as the wound on Luoping's chest quickly scabbed over and healed. The corpse-like pallor faded visibly from his face, and his lips regained their color. This guy really came back to life. Chapter 40, A Lofty Ideal. Luzin was amazed. Someone who was on the verge of death actually bounced back just from a tiny bit of food. This was practically like divine healing. He wondered if, as a new human, he might have that kind of ability too. "I'm good now, thanks. Luoping suddenly jumped up from the ground, lively and full of energy, no longer looking like the Walking Dead. He said, "So, what do you think? Not bad, right? I've been relying on this ability to fight those bastards tooth and nail. They just can't kill me, no matter what. Bet they're losing their minds by now." Luzin nodded repeatedly. "Impressive, really impressive." Luoping looked smug. "Jealous, aren't you? Type B new humans like me are super rare. I've only met one other like me in all this time." Luzin nodded again. "Yeah, jealous for sure. But man, constantly being near death and getting hurt. Kinda sucks. I'd rather be the kind of person who just steamrolls everyone and never loses a fight." Yao nodded from the side, agreeing with Luzin. Luoping fell silent. "You really suck at giving compliments." Luzin didn't pursue the topic further and asked, "Didn't you say you were laying low for a few days? How'd you end up fighting people again?" Luoping's face darkened. "They stole my car and killed the teammate I finally managed to find. I'm not letting that go without payback." Luzin and Yao exchanged a glance. "When did this guy ever have a teammate?" Luoping glanced toward the county and took a deep breath. "Can you spare me some food? A Type B new human needs food to fully recover. I used up everything I had trying to avenge my teammate. I've got nothing on me now, but I wiped out everyone at Jia village. The people in the county took a few beatings too and don't dare come out anymore. I didn't wait around there just in case something went wrong. Turns out it was the right move to come play dead here. Their base still has some supplies, but no food. I can trade their supplies with you. If you trust me, take me there so I can grab the stuff. If you don't, just wait here. What do you want? Weapons? Tools? I'll bring them back for you." Luzin and Yao looked at each other and made up their minds. Yao said, "No room in the car. You hang on from outside." Luoping grinned. "Sure." So Luzin started the car, Yao got into the front passenger seat, and Luoping grabbed onto the window frame from the outside, standing on the footboard, all while being held at gunpoint by Yao as they headed to Jia village. This guy was still a chatterbox. Even with a gun in his face and wind blasting him outside the car, he wouldn't shut up. Without needing Luzin or Yao to ask anything, he spilled the whole story. "I was hiding in a cave not long ago and, surprise, someone else was living there too. Not a new human, but super motivated, wanted to be my teammate. Guy's got a good brain and some great ideas. Probably could have done a lot. After laying low for 2 or 3 days, I figured those 2 groups were too busy to keep looking for me, so I planned to take my new teammate back to base. But when we stopped to refuel at that gas station outside the county, we got ambushed by people from the county. They stole my car and took my supplies. That part's whatever. Stuff can always be replaced. But what they really shouldn't have done was kill my new teammate." Yao could feel the deep sorrow and rage pouring off this sloppy bro, but chose to ignore it and kept pointing the gun at him. Luzin, hands on the steering wheel, said calmly, "Sorry for your loss." "Sorry my ass. All I want now is revenge, not condolences." Luoping gritted his teeth. "The world's crawling with parasites. These people act like wild animals. Do you know how hard it is to find a teammate like him? I've been in and out of base, all over the place. North, south, east, West. Seen so many people, but I barely found anyone I could call a partner. The people I met were all either claiming territory like warlords or drifting around looking for some oasis. Scavenging supplies, fighting over them, going insane for just a little bit of food. It's crazy. Don't they ever think about it? The old world ended years ago. They've been searching for an oasis for years. Has anyone actually found one? Those supplies are all remnants from the old world. Sooner or later, they'll run out. What are they going to do then? Yahweh was momentarily stunned. Luzin said, "So what, you're planning to build an oasis yourself?" Luoping's eyes lit up. He shook his head, tossing aside hair the wind had blown into his mouth, and stared at Luzin with burning eyes. "I knew it. Bro, sis, you two are just like me. The environment now is nothing like the old world. It's way worse. But nobody's thinking about how, even in this extreme cold and weird terrain, animals and plants are still thriving. After the cold passes, they grow back even stronger, totally unaffected. Old world people studied plants, tamed animals, produced old world food. We just keep clinging to their stuff without thinking. Can't this new era provide us with new, endless sources of food too? The supplies are relics of the past, and the oasis is just a fantasy. We can't just look back. We have to look forward, and start right where we are." Luzin exhaled softly. "You'd make a great motivational speaker." Luoping chuckled. But just then, Yahweh suddenly said, "People have tried to do this before. They all got wiped out." Luzin turned to glance at Yahweh, unsure if she was talking about her own mother. Luoping nodded. "I know. And it wasn't just one group or one attempt. But they all failed because they focused too much on ideals and forgot that people out here have turned into beasts. Vicious, savage beasts. They didn't even get a chance to make real progress before they were torn apart. That's why if I'm going to do this now, I can't be like them. I need to grow some fangs." While they talked, the car had already arrived at Jajia village. Bodies were sprawled everywhere. Clearly, there had been a major fight, and all the enemies were already taken out. Luoping got out of the car. Soon, he came back with 2 guns slung across his back, both pants pockets bulging, and 2 heavy machetes in his hands. "One gun for you, one for me. Same with knives. I need the bullets, so I can only give you a few. How about 10 rounds? In exchange for those 3 packs of instant noodles, if you don't use all 3, I'll return whatever's left the next time we meet." Luzin had Yahweh take the weapons and bullets. Then he pulled the remaining 3 packs of noodles from his backpack and handed them to Luoping. "Thanks," Luoping said, tearing open one of the packs right away and devouring it in no time. He had only eaten a small piece of dry noodles earlier and hadn't fully recovered. After finishing a whole pack now, he looked like he was back to full health. He asked, "Mind giving me a ride a bit further? Just drop me near the county." Yahweh said, "You hang on yourself." "Thanks." Luoping thanked them again. Then Luzin drove out of Jajia village, with Yahweh still pointing the gun at Luoping. When they reached a spot where the white flag could be seen fluttering on the county's statue, Luoping jumped off the car. "See you around." He said this with his back to Luzin and Yahweh, then strode toward the county with his gun in hand. Chapter 41, Logistics. Luoping's back looked bleak yet determined. The ruined jungle of steel ahead of him loomed so large in comparison that even the white flag fluttering in the wind seemed big enough to hold countless versions of him. Luzin watched Luoping walk farther and farther away and asked, "Do you think what he said was true?" Yahweh was also watching Luoping leave. When she heard Luzin's question, she replied, "No idea." Her voice sounded completely calm. But Luzin could still tell. Beneath that calm surface, there was something stirred. In a world like this, having someone like him really wasn't easy. Even if they weren't walking the same path, it still made people feel something. "Should we help him a little?" Luzin said. Yahweh turned her head to look at Luzin. "How?" Luzin said, "He can revive. We can't. It's not smart to go fight side by side with him. What if we find a spot and handle logistics for him?" Yahweh said, "Okay." Luzin smiled and tapped the horn twice. Luoping, who was up ahead, heard the sound and turned around. Luzin waved him over. Luoping hesitated for a moment, then walked back, annoyed. "Bro, sis, what is it? I finally built up some momentum, and you just wiped it all out." Luzin asked, "You sure you'll come out alive this time?" Luoping grinned. "How would I know?" he said, patting the pocket of his coat. The instant noodles inside made a pap-pap sound. "Still got some rations left, right? With 2 extra lives, I should be safer." Luzin said, "Careful you don't crush them." Luoping said, "No worries. Once the fight starts, it's bound to get crushed anyway. It's all in the bag. Still edible." Luzin said, I'll leave the drone you gave me here. Once you run out of food and still aren't done, come back here. I'll use the drone to guide you to me and get you more food. Luoping's eyes lit up. Bro, you really don't need to go through all that trouble. If you've got extra food, just hand it over now. Luzin said, you wish. We're out of rations. I'll cook fresh meals for you instead. Way better than dry food, no? But let's be clear. When you come here, you better shake off the people from the county. Otherwise, my drone's not taking off. He still had some rations actually. The instant noodles were gone, but there were still a few expired mini breads. But food that convenient had to be saved for emergencies. What he and Yahweh had in abundance was white rice and dehydrated vegetables. Since this place wasn't far from the shelter, they could go back and restock once they used it up. Plus, there was water and trees nearby. No shortage of firewood either. So Luzin was willing to use white rice and dehydrated vegetables, but didn't want to hand out any more dry food. Luoping looked troubled. What if I get hurt too bad and can't make it here? Luzin said, how about right here? Luoping said, this should work. I'm a type Benu human. Even half dead, I can still move. Dragging corpses over here shouldn't be a problem. Luzin said, then try to drag the corpses here. If it looks safe, I'll bring you food. Okay. No problem. I promise. Luoping nodded over and over. Don't worry, bro, sis. You're helping me out like this. I swear I won't cause trouble. Once I'm out, I'll bring you some nice stuff. Luzin smiled. Alright. And with that, Luoping waved and turned again, striding toward Fengzheng's county seat. Luzin drove around and found a semi-hidden spot close to a water source, with trees nearby. After Dog scouted the area, he got out of the car. You take the drone back to where we just parked, stay hidden, and when you see Luoping coming and it doesn't look too dangerous, have the drone take off, guide him, and bring him here. Luzin gave Dog the order, and Dog flew the drone off. As for Luzin and Yahweh, they split up the tasks. Luzin started a fire and cooked, Yahweh stood guard with a gun. Luzin didn't actually have Dog confirm that no one was following Luoping. That's what he told Luoping, but if the enemies behind him weren't many and Yahweh could handle them, he didn't mind. And whether or not someone was tailing Luoping, with Yahweh on watch, safety was still improved. Chopping wood, making fire, adding rice, fetching water, cooking. Luzin went through each step, not being too picky. Just boiled the white rice and dehydrated vegetables together. He didn't use the new bag of white rice. There was still some left from the big bag they hadn't finished in the past few days. Barely stuffed into the car. And now it came in handy. From afar, gunshots could faintly be heard. Looked like the battle had begun. At first, the gunfire was sparse. Then it stopped. After a while, it started again. Then stopped again. Then, a little later, it went crack crack bang bang again. Luzin wondered if that guy had already munched through the last 2 bags of instant noodles. They sure had a lot of bullets. Envious. The rice and veggies were done. Luzin made extra, called Yahweh over, and the two ate a bit. There was still plenty left. The gunfire stopped again. Then nothing for a long while. Luzin and Yahweh weren't sure if Luoping had made it with the corpses, so they decided to wait and watch. After a while, the buzzing sound of the drone came, and a man covered in blood staggered into view. Who else could it be but Luoping? It looked like he'd dragged himself over. There was even a hole on top of his head. Clearly grazed by a bullet. No one followed him, so Yahweh didn't need to shoot. It's fine. Bullets already dug out. Just need some food and I'll be good as new. Luoping grinned, his jagged teeth soaked red with blood. Looked like the fight had been intense. Then hurry up and eat. Luzin quickly waved him over. But Luoping was surprisingly particular. He pulled something out and said, I'm covered in blood. Don't wanna dirty your pot. Just put the food in here. Luzin looked closely. It was a folded-up instant noodle bag in Luoping's hand. He took it, filled it with rice and dehydrated veggies. Luoping grabbed it back and started scooping the food with his hands, shoveling it into his mouth. 1 bag of rice. Gone in no time. Nice. Seriously didn't expect you'd have stuff this good. If I don't bring back some good loot for you, that'd be just wrong. Luoping said that, then flopped to the ground with a thud, closed his eyes. A moment later, just like he said. Back to full health. He pulled out 2 more empty bags. The leftovers from earlier. And said, can you fill all 3 bags up? I'm going back to fuck them up. This time, I'm definitely bringing you some awesome loot. Chapter 42, Living Hades. This time when Luoping went back, only sporadic gunshots came from Fengzheng County's direction, on and off. The intense battle seemed to have eased up. But Luzin guessed that it had nothing to do with how fierce the fight was. Probably just meant they were running out of bullets. He couldn't help but sigh. We should never mess with type B new humans. They're like unshakable leeches. Way too clingy. Yao Wei nodded in deep agreement. She didn't really understand what unshakable leech meant, but she could feel it too. Having an enemy like Sloppy Bro was just a huge pain. Not only could you not kill them, but they'd stick to you non-stop, drain your ammo. Disgusting. Have to guard the corpses. She suddenly had an idea and said, cut off the head, arms, and legs. Take off the jaw too. Make sure it's completely dead, and you won't have to worry about it eating and reviving. Luzin couldn't help but glance at Yao Wei. This woman was really a living Hades. Best to toss the head into the river for the fish, and scatter the rest. Or just smash it to pieces with a hammer. Luzin added a few lines. The two exchanged a smile, both pleased to have found a solution. They moved to another spot and had Dog take the drone to guard just outside the county again. No more gunshots came from the county's direction. After quite a while, the sound of a car engine came. Luzin and Yao Wei were on slightly higher ground. Following the noise, they saw Wo Ping. He'd taken back his car and was driving toward them. Dog and the drone were on the car roof, neither walking nor flying. Just hitched a ride. Once Luzin and Yao Wei confirmed there was no danger, they stood up. Wo Ping spotted them from afar, drove the car closer, parked below, looked up and grinned. All done. Thanks for the food. I found 2 pretty nice spoils of war, giving them to you. As he spoke, he got out of the car, opened the rear door, and pulled out 2 metal containers. These weren't the round barrels like the one on Yao Wei's car. They were rectangular, sealed at the top, with a handle and a spout. Not the kind you'd use for fetching water. Yao Wei was momentarily puzzled, not understanding what they were for. But Luzin's eyes lit up. Gas cans? Wo Ping smiled proudly. Yep, gas cans. What do you think? Good stuff, right? With these, you can store gas in the car. Totally helps with mileage anxiety. Definitely good stuff. Luzin nodded. Yao Wei's car actually had a metal container too. It was used to store gasoline. When he first met Yao Wei, she was carrying that container. But that can was too small, and it didn't have a lid on top. If you filled it and left it in the car, it was easy to spill, which was dangerous. So Yao Wei had always treated that can as a backup. If the car ran out of gas in a weird spot and couldn't start, she'd hide the car, carry the can, and go looking for fuel. But with these 2 gas cans, it was a whole different story. These cans were big enough and, most importantly, had a sealed lid. Even the spout had a little cap on it. You could fill them up and not worry about spills. Safe and able to store way more fuel. Basically a must-have for travel. Wo Ping said, totally thanks to your food. Where'd you scavenge that stuff from? After eating your rice and reviving, I felt even stronger than before. Compared to your white rice, what I was eating before was literal pig slop. I just used your rice to go mess with those guys 2 more rounds, completely broke them. They even drove the car out for me, didn't dare keep it. See, I still have 1 bag of rice left. As he spoke, he patted his coat pocket. The bag inside made a dull pap-pap sound, probably because it was stuffed with rice. After all that, he tossed 1 of the metal gas cans over to Luzin and Yao Wei and said, here, 1 for you. That okay? I need to keep 1 myself. Yao Wei reached out and caught it. Luzin said, 1's enough. There wasn't much space in the car. More than 1 wouldn't fit. Wo Ping sighed and said, too bad. My precious books. They ripped them all up. Otherwise, I would have given you some. Bunch of bastards. Wasting treasures. Those kinds of books. You gotta read the whole thing. What's the point of splitting them up? Some of them even tore a page in half. Each person taking a piece. Luzin laughed. Didn't you already give me a comic book? That's enough. Yao Wei recalled the content of that comic, pursed her lips, and couldn't help glancing at Luzin. After staying in the shelter for a while and keeping hydrated every day, her lips weren't dry and cracked like before. They looked smooth and pink, quite lovely. Wo Ping happened to catch the look on her face and instantly laughed. Right, 1's enough. After saying that, he got serious again. Bro, sis. You 2 are rare folks in this world. My base needs people like you. Come with me. Let's survive in style. What do you say? Luzin turned to glance at Yao Wei. Yao Wei turned to look at him too, and there was a flicker of panic in her expression. Truthfully, Luzin was a little tempted by Wo Ping's offer. He didn't know what Wo Ping's base was like, but considering the guy could come out again and again to find people, it must be well stocked. And judging by what Wo Ping said, he'd already gathered like-minded people, all trying to carve out a future in this new world and make it livable for humanity. Hadn't he been traveling south all this way looking for a place like that? Yao Wei said there were oases in this world. Luo Ping said after all this time they still hadn't found one. That just meant they had to make one. And Lu Xun thought that made a lot of sense. Old world humans had gone from primitive tribes to modern civilization, building skyscrapers, planting crops, raising livestock, turning the whole world into an oasis for human survival. Why couldn't New World humans do the same? But, judging from Yao Wei's reaction, she seemed resistant. Didn't want to interact with more people. Forget it, forget it. They'd only met Luo Ping once or twice. The guy seemed a bit crafty too. Unlike Yao Wei, who was familiar and straightforward. Who knew if he was telling the truth? Better to stay cautious. Better not. Lu Xun said, we're used to just the two of us. Don't really know how to deal with a bigger group. Let's part ways here. But can you at least tell me roughly where your base is? That way, if we run into someone who's like-minded, we can refer them to you. Yao Wei immediately turned to look at Lu Xun, her eyes slightly stunned. Lu Xun noticed her gaze and gave her a smile. Yao Wei quickly turned her head away, pulling her eyes back with it. Chapter 43, Wuxia novel. Too bad. Alright. Luo Ping said too bad, but didn't insist. He went along with Lu Xun's words and said, my base is in the north of Shanyang County, Pingchuan City, to the south. Big bro, if you run into good people, make sure to send them my way. If anyone ends up there, I'll find them. He suddenly turned back to his sedan, dug something out, and said, here, I scavenged this from those folks in the county, consider it your rations payback. It was a small black cloth pouch. No one knew how many hands it had passed through or how badly it had been handled. Stains all over, really hard to look at. Lu Xun took it, opened it, and found 6 or 7 compressed biscuits inside. This stuff was definitely worth more than the few packs of instant noodles he had given Luo Ping. He said, you already gave us the gas can, why give this too? Luo Ping shook his head and said, the gas can was something I promised to give you once I scavenge it. This is to repay your rations. It's not the same. Lu Xun didn't make a fuss, just accepted it directly and smiled, then you're really losing out. Luo Ping grinned too, how am I losing out? A gas can plus 7 compressed biscuits, and I got... Let me count. 6 lives. How is that a loss? Lu Xun said, if you put it that way, it's really not a loss. He hesitated for a bit, then turned to Yao Wei and said, should we return the favor and give this guy something too? He thought Yao Wei would hesitate or flat out refuse, but surprisingly, she agreed without a second thought and said, okay. After she spoke, she went straight back to her car and brought out a still-sealed bag of vacuum-packed white rice. Luo Ping's eyes went wide instantly. This is the white rice you gave me before? Lu Xun laughed. What, never seen it before? His look was like a flashy rich guy eyeing a country bumpkin. Luo Ping stared hard at a bag of rice, swallowed hard, and said, I've only ever seen this in books. This is my first time tasting it. It's amazing. As he spoke, he turned to look at Lu Xun and Yao Wei. You're really giving me this? Yao Wei didn't say anything, just tossed the whole bag of rice into Luo Ping's car through the open door. Lu Xun chuckled, carried the gas can back to his car, tidied up a bit, shifted the other bag of rice to a different spot, which just made enough space to fit the gas can. Only after doing all that did he sit down in the driver's seat. Yao Wei followed right after, tossed the stuff down, turned around, opened the front passenger seat door, climbed in, shut the door, and didn't even glance at Luo Ping. Alright, this is where we part ways. See you around. Lu Xun sat in the car, waved to Luo Ping, started the engine, and hit the gas, heading west. Luo Ping stared blankly at Lu Xun's car but for a moment, then smiled and got back in his own car, hit the gas, and followed. He was heading west too, then would turn south. And his sedan was way faster than Yao Wei's car. So very quickly, he caught up with Lu Xun and Yao Wei. Do. He honked the horn, then picked up the loudspeaker in the car and said, the road of the Jiang is long, see you again someday. After speaking, he tossed the loudspeaker aside, floored the gas, and returned Lu Xun a car butt. This big bro must have read Wuxia novels too. The way he talks, smooth and poetic. Just like me. Luo Ping grinned widely, looked straight ahead, and muttered to himself, forgot to ask big bro what novel he had. Whatever, if fate lets us meet again, I'll ask then. His sunglasses hadn't been ruined by the people in Pingcheng County. Still lying on the front passenger seat. He reached over, found them, and slid them onto his ears and nose, feeling even more cool and carefree. Behind them, Lu Xun and Yao Wei soon couldn't see Luo Ping's car anymore. Lu Xun chewed over the words Luo Ping shouted through the car horn earlier and laughed. That guy must have read Wuxia novels or something. Didn't expect there to still be Wuxia novels. Or something like them. In this world, Yahweh had no concept of wuxia novels. Hearing Luzin say that, she instinctively looked toward the backseat. Luzin's backpack was sitting there, and stuffed in the side pocket was that book she couldn't bear to look at directly. These two were seriously cut from the same cloth. The wuxia novel they were talking about. Could it be related to that thing? She was letting her thoughts wander when suddenly Luzin turned to glance at her and asked, "Why'd you give that rice to Luo Ping?" Yahweh also looked at Luzin. "Weren't you the one who wanted to give him something?" Luzin said, "But I never said it had to be rice." Yahweh asked, "Then wasn't it what you wanted to give?" "Yeah." Luzin went quiet for a moment, then smiled. "Does this count as being in sync?" "What?" Yahweh didn't get it. Luzin said, "Like a pair of phoenixes flying in sync, hearts linked with a single spark. It means we don't have to say anything. Our thoughts are already in tune." Yahweh suddenly got a bit flustered, quickly turned back around, stared at the front windshield, heart oddly racing. "And no," she said, I just thought the car was already packed. If we took in the gas can, we wouldn't have room." Clearing out a bag of rice to give him made space for the gas can. Luzin smiled and said, "That's what I thought too. Look at this car. Once we cleared out a bag of rice, we could just barely stuff in the gas can. If we didn't give him a bag, there really wouldn't have been space." Yahweh nodded, pressed her lips together, and didn't say anything else. She didn't know what to say, and didn't want to say anything. But she knew Luzin really did want to give Sloppy Bro a bag of white rice. That's why she went to get the rice. Maybe the cramped car was part of the reason, but it definitely wasn't the main reason Luzin wanted to give the rice. Sloppy Bro Luo Ping's thoughts and actions must have impressed Luzin. So even if he didn't agree to go with Luo Ping, he'd still do what he could to help him. She felt the same. Honestly, it was nothing special. Just having the same idea. Totally normal. But for some reason, after hearing Luzin say in sync, she suddenly didn't want to admit it. So awkward. The car drove on, reaching the road where they had met Luo Ping before. Yahweh snapped out of her thoughts and became alert again. This was the spot where they'd first encountered Luo Ping and those people from Liang Shui village. Luzin and Yahweh could still see the wrecked pickup truck parked on the side. The door was open, and both the steering wheel and car seat were gone. Clearly someone had already picked it clean. Would the people from Liang Shui village still try to block them? Do. That familiar car horn blared again. Luo Ping's sedan had somehow dropped behind them again and now sped past once more. As he passed, Luo Ping turned his head, grinned wide, showed his crooked white teeth, picked up the loudspeaker again, and said, "Big bro, big sis, don't worry. I've already been to Liang Shui village. I trashed that group from the county so bad, they don't dare touch us anymore. The county is their prize now, and they're all heading there in a big crowd. See you again someday." Then he threw another car butt at Luzin and Yahweh and disappeared from view. Chapter 44, The Thinking of New Humans. Luo Ping seemed to be telling the truth. After that, Luzin and Yahweh traveled together and, once they left Fengzheng County's jurisdiction, didn't encounter anything else. The road in the latter part of Fengzheng County became more and more difficult. Winding and twisting, with ups and downs. It was a mountain road. And the road had been in disrepair for years, far more dangerous than elsewhere. Luzin had no choice but to slow down and drive carefully. Did we pick the wrong road? What if we run into a collapsed section or a rock fall? He couldn't help but wonder aloud as he took a sharp turn. On such cliffside curves, in the old days, you'd probably need a convex mirror at the corner to check if any car was coming from the other side. Now, those convex mirrors were still there, but they'd become blurry. Nothing could be seen clearly anymore. Fortunately, in today's world, there probably weren't any cars heading through roads like this, so the chances of encountering oncoming traffic were slim. As long as they took it slow, it was still relatively safe. It was a pity. There had been a fork in the road earlier, and they'd chosen this path because they needed to keep heading west. No idea whether Luo Ping, who was ahead of them, had taken the fork or not. If Luo Ping hadn't turned off and was on the same road, then it should mean the road ahead was passable and problem-free. After all, Luo Ping had originally come from the southwest. Maybe he had already traveled this road before. If it's blocked by a collapse, we block it up. If it's fallen rocks, we move the rocks. Yahweh offered a brand new way of thinking. That's when Luzin realized. Right, he was a new human now. How could he still be stumped by such a minor problem? He gave himself a serious self-check. He still hadn't fully adapted to the mindset and action style of a new human. If you run into a bridge, build it. If you run into a wall, smash it. He had the strength for this. He shouldn't be struggling with such simple issues. Looks like Yahweh already had experience handling these kinds of situations. If it's a collapse we can't block, we can lift the car over. Yahweh added. Luzin. She wasn't wrong. They really could lift a car. But just picturing himself and Yahweh carrying a cargo-loaded off-road jumpy together felt totally off. Luckily, the road ahead wasn't collapsed, only blocked by fallen rocks. After driving along the mountain road for about an hour, they saw a section completely blocked by rocks that had fallen from the mountain at some unknown time. Some of the rocks were big, some small. The small ones were manageable, but the big ones weren't something an average person could lift. But fortunately, neither Luzin nor Yahweh were average. The two of them first had the mechanical dog deploy a drone to scout ahead, and after confirming that it was purely natural with no people around, they got out of the car. They cleared the rocks from outside in, big and small, tossing them down the cliff. Before long, the road was cleared. They even used the shovel from the car to push the smaller bits of rubble off to the side and made sure there weren't any sharp fragments that could puncture the tires. Then they got back in the car and hit the road again. Good thing we're new humans, Luzin said with a smile to Yahweh. Yahweh nodded and said, From there, it was all downhill. Looked like the mountain road was finally ending. Yahweh opened the map and said, Ahead is Mengson City. It's all grassland, nowhere to hide. We'll have to stay alert. Got it. Luzin looked out as he drove. After descending the mountain, the world opened up under the high sky. Huge swaths of clouds loomed above, giving an incredible sense of vastness. He turned to look out the left window. The distant hills were dark like ink, with thunderclouds gathered above. But on his side, it was bright blue skies. Hard to imagine this blue was connected to those black clouds. Looking to the right, that whole sky was black clouds. The scenery under them made the phrase mountains like inked brows suddenly take on real meaning for Luzin. But these weren't just any inked brows. A woman with brows like that would surely have heroic, bold, striking sword-shaped eyebrows. Mengson City. They really nailed the name. Luzin muttered to himself. No wonder Yahweh had said, We're not really in the south yet. The true south probably wouldn't have scenery like this. He'd been traveling on foot all this time. Too slow after all. What? Yahweh asked. Nothing. Luzin couldn't explain the impression from his past life, so he just said, I just feel like this place really suits the name. These mountains, this grass, this sky. Feels like it should be called that. Yahweh didn't think his answer was strange or perfunctory. She nodded and kept looking at the map. Her slender fingers pointed to the map and said, If we keep going straight for a bit, there's a gas station. Let's check it out. Okay. Luzin agreed and kept driving. The road, long left without maintenance, was cracked and fragmented. Resilient weeds had spread from the roadside grass onto the road, becoming large patches. Unlike the grass off the road, the grass on the road was shorter, while off-road it grew tall. There was still moisture on the grass, and a couple of spots on the road were shaded from the sun, with ice and snow still unmelted. It looked like this place had just gone through a deep freeze, and Luzin and Yahweh had narrowly missed it. Luzin suddenly remembered what Luoping had said. These plants, growing stubbornly in a world full of change. How had they survived wave after wave of freezing and burning? It was definitely something worth studying. If the principle behind it could be figured out, maybe they could grow crops even in this world's harsh environment? Finally, a gas station appeared ahead. Amazingly, the sign was still intact, clear enough for Luzin to read, Eternal Heaven Petrochemical Gas Station. After reading it, he couldn't help but say, this has to be a local gas station from Mengson. Why? Yahweh didn't understand. Luzin explained, just a guess. It's just that a name like Eternal Heaven sounds local. Maybe. It's a deity from the local faith or something? I see. Yahweh was full of admiration for Luzin, thinking he really knew a lot. Though it wasn't very useful. As usual, before approaching the gas station, they had the dog control the drone to scout. After confirming it was safe, they hooked up the power and started fueling. They were lucky. Out of the 4 fuel pumps, one was still working. They filled up the car and also topped off their newly acquired gas can, then stashed it back in the car. And honestly, with all the stuff in the car, it worked out. The gas can fit perfectly, didn't budge an inch, couldn't even wobble, actually made it safer. Next to the gas station was a small 2-story building. In the old world, who knows who had built this little courtyard here? The doors and windows had all been removed, and weeds had overrun the yard. Looked like no one had been here in a long time. When Luzin had the dog scout the gas station, he also had it check the little building and confirmed it was safe. While Yahweh was refueling the car, he went into the station building to take a look. Found nothing. And now planned to explore that small building. Chapter 45, Dog and Underling. Perhaps because of the shelter of the courtyard walls, the wild grass in this small building grew much more vigorously than outside. The weeds were a mix of green and yellow, at least half the height of a person, forming a barrier between the courtyard gate and the small building. Luzin and Yao Wei pushed through the overgrown grass and walked up the stairs to the door of the building. When they looked back, the grass they had parted had already returned to its original position without any trace of disturbance. "Do you think there are any insects or snakes in here?" Luzin asked. Yao Wei shook her head. "I don't know." She wasn't like the delicate little girls from her previous life. Tough as she was, she wouldn't show the slightest fear at the thought of possible insects or snakes in the wild grass. In fact, after Luzin remarked, "If there are bugs, that'd be great. They're full of protein, very nutritious," she became even more energetic. She started peering into the grass, seemingly trying to find some insects to eat. Luzin couldn't help but laugh. "Stop looking. If one day we're really desperate, we'll eat insects. But right now, we've got rice, vegetables, bread, and compressed biscuits. No need to eat bugs." Yao Wei was a bit puzzled. "Shouldn't we try to stock up on any food we can find?" Luzin replied, "Insects don't count as food to stock up on." "Oh." Yao Wei felt a little regretful. She had just learned about a new food source but couldn't gather it for stockpiling. She looked at the wild grass all around, thinking about the possible food hidden in it, and her heart felt a little uneasy. But as she stared, she suddenly froze. "What's wrong?" Luzin asked. "Look over there." Yao Wei pointed to an area by the west wall. The grass there was much shorter than elsewhere. The grass from the southeast, north, and west sides crowded in, covering it up, so unless you looked closely, it was hard to notice. At first, Luzin hadn't noticed the difference, but when Yao Wei pointed it out, he saw it too. He and Yao Wei exchanged a glance and understood each other's thoughts. They pushed through the grass and walked over to the small building's west wall. When they reached the base of the wall and took a closer look, they indeed found a rectangular patch where the grass was slightly lower, and it was more neatly arranged than elsewhere. It was only when they got close that they could tell. If they had stayed far away and not paid attention, they wouldn't have noticed. "Dog!" Luzin called out, summoning the mechanical dog. In this overgrown grass, the dog's wheels couldn't be used, and it could only wobble through the thick grass that was much taller than it. Luzin simply walked over, picked up the dog, and directed it. "Check this spot. Is there something wrong?" The dog then scanned the suspicious area with its dog-like eyes. Immediately, its eyes lit up, and its wheels lifted slightly, then gently lowered again. Held by Luzin, the dog's paws lifted and lowered in an amusing manner. Still, despite the humorous appearance, it had done its job. Luzin saw the light in the dog's eyes shine on one corner and realized something. He parted the grass and bent down to investigate, and sure enough, he found something wrong. There were square bricks on the ground, with wild grass growing between the cracks. The grass had been growing wildly for years, causing the bricks to buckle, creating uneven, hill-like mounds. However, the mountain area pointed out by the dog's light became much neater as Luzin moved closer. The texture and color of the bricks seemed similar to others, but the cracks between them were much smaller, and the damage caused by grass growth was less pronounced. "Yao Wei, pass me the knife." Luzin crouched down without getting up, raising his hand. Yao Wei immediately took out the knife she carried and handed it to him. Luzin took the knife and inserted it into the crack of the brick the dog had highlighted, easily prying up the brick. The brick came up with a large chunk of dirt, still attached to the grass. Luzin pulled the grass up and another big chunk of dirt followed. He poked the soil with the knife, which got buried halfway, then heard a ding sound as the knife hit something hard. Sure enough. Luzin's mind stirred. He twisted the knife, prying it back and forth several times, clearing away the dirt to reveal what was underneath. A rusty iron plate, looking quite thick. "This should be a basement," Luzin said as he looked at Yao Wei, smiling. "You're impressive. You actually found this place." Yao Wei, however, said, "You're the impressive one. If you hadn't mentioned insects, we wouldn't have discovered this until the dog found it." She implicitly acknowledged that they would have found it eventually, thanks to the dog. Luzin didn't waste any more time. He cleared away some more soil, making room for the knife to work horizontally, and then started cutting along the line of the west wall. The iron plate was so thick that it had to have a handle. Otherwise, how could it be lifted? Even if it were electric, there should be a backup handle in case the electric system failed. As he cut and dug, he quickly ran into an obstruction. It seemed the handle on the iron plate wasn't recessed or mechanical. Luzin dug a bit more along the obstruction, clearing the dirt and pulling away the grass, revealing a slightly curved rectangular handle welded onto the iron plate. He handed the knife back to Yao Wei, pulled the grass from the iron plate, which brought up more bricks, then tossed them aside one by one. Then, he grabbed the handle of the iron plate and pulled with all his strength, but it was still a bit difficult. He pulled again, and finally, the edge of the iron plate loosened, and the soil shifted, allowing Luzin to lift one corner. With that, the crack at the edge of the iron plate suddenly opened up, and the whole shape of the plate became clear. It was a rectangular iron door, at least 2 meters long and a meter wide, with a thickness of at least 3 centimeters. The remaining bricks around the iron plate loosened, and the dirt and weeds scattered everywhere. Luzin cleared it all away, revealing another handle beneath the plate. He then handed the dog to Yahweh and used both hands to grab the handle and pulled with all his might. The strength of a new human showed once again, and with a miracle of strength, the door was finally lifted. Zip! A grating sound followed. When the iron door was completely lifted, Luzin and Yahweh could see clearly that underneath the iron door, there were indeed controllable metal rods, possibly hydraulic or pneumatic. But whatever they were, they had lost their function by now, and the metal rods' connections on both sides had only made Luzin exert more effort than necessary. If it hadn't been for these rods, Luzin could have easily lifted the iron door. Under the iron door was another wooden door. Luzin opened it, and a damp, musty air rushed out to meet them. Dog. Luzin's command was short, but the dog understood. It first sent the drone down to check, and only after confirming that there was no danger did it signal to Luzin and Yahweh. This dog had evolved a bit of underling behavior. The most dangerous tasks were now handled by the drone instead of it going first. Chapter 46, Dog's Dependency Syndrome. After the iron door was opened, the pit led to a passage that went underground toward the small building. There were no stairs, so one had to jump directly into it. The passage was just over a meter high. People had to crouch to get through, but there was still over a meter of clearance at the top. So, without stairs, people had to jump down into the pit. At over 2 meters high, it wasn't particularly wide, making it difficult for an average person to navigate. Luzin guessed that the basement probably hadn't been dug from this spot when it was first constructed. After Luzin and Yahweh jumped in, they crouched and crawled through the passage, which was about 2 meters long. Then, they were met with a sudden open space. They jumped down a meter-high step and found themselves in a square room, with desks, chairs, computers, beds, and walls full of cabinets. In the corner, there was a toilet and a wash basin. Next to the wash basin was a metal ladder, which seemed to be just the right size to be placed horizontally at the entrance of the passage. Luzin understood. This ladder must have been used to descend into the basement from the entrance, and after descending, it could be removed. If someone were to discover the basement and try to enter, they would have to jump into the pit, which would definitely make some noise and alert the people inside the basement. But once inside, there was another passage that required crouching, giving the basement's occupants enough time to react and use weapons against any intruders. However, there were no signs of a struggle here. Clearly, this setup had never been used. In fact, there were no traces of anyone having been here at all. No skeletons, no hair. Even the shelves on the walls were completely empty. Luzin was very suspicious that, after the basement was completed, it might never have been put to use. He checked the bed, which did have a mattress. It was softer than the ones at the Fengzheng County Tan Village shelter, and it seemed like it would be very comfortable to sleep on. The mattress had creases on the sheets, indicating that someone had either sat or even lain on it. But it was also possible that after the bed was set up, someone tried it out and then left, without actually staying here. "Have you found anything?" Luzin asked Yahweh. Yahweh shook her head to indicate that she hadn't found anything. "Dog, how about you?" Luzin asked the mechanical dog. The dog blinked its eyes twice, also indicating that it had found nothing. It seemed that there really was nothing here, and it probably had never been used. Luzin looked around again, not giving up. His gaze landed on the computer on the desk, and he instructed the dog to connect the power supply. The computer still turned on, though the machine made a buzzing sound, indicating that the years of accumulated dust had overburdened the internal fan. Starting the computer took some time, and Luzin and Yahweh had to wait several minutes before the screen finally switched to the last used interface. However, to their frustration, the computer had a desktop password. Luzin tried 1,234,567,890, 6 ones, 6 sixes, and 8 eights, but none of them worked. He didn't dare try more combinations, afraid that the computer would lock him out. Sigh, if only the dog could maintain its state while supplying power. It could crack the password for us. Luzin sighed. When the dog was supplying power, it always froze up. Otherwise, the dog was capable of cracking passwords. Yahweh nodded but then felt a little guilty for being so greedy. The dog was already so impressive. What more could she ask of it? But she didn't say this aloud to Luzin. She felt the dog belonged to him, so she couldn't impose her own expectations on him. Moreover, no matter how much Luzin hoped, the dog really couldn't do it. Just then, Luzin suddenly had an idea. He turned to Yahweh and said, "How about we find the electrical box in this small building, use your power bank to connect the power, and then let the dog try cracking the password. He suddenly remembered that Yahweh had a tool to power up the circuit. Before they had the dog, Yahweh had always used this tool to power up the circuit when refueling at the gas station. Now that both of them relied on the dog, they had forgotten about that tool. Yahweh immediately realized this, nodded, and said, "Okay." She turned and left to find the small building's electrical box. She was a little annoyed with herself for forgetting her tool. Recently, she seemed to have become too reliant on Luzin. Even more reliant on the dog. She couldn't keep doing this. But the dog was so useful. As she pondered this, she went to the room and found the electrical box. In contrast to the basement, the small building was in complete disarray. Empty and seemingly visited by many people. Even the doors and windows had been removed. The ones that hadn't been removed had been thoroughly smashed. Yahweh found the electrical box on the wall at the corner of the second-floor staircase. She had her backpack with her when she got out of the car, and the tool for powering the circuit was inside it. She took it out, plugged it into the electrical box, and everything worked fine. She tested the lights in the room, and they came on, showing no issues with the circuit. She closed the electrical box and covered it up before returning to the basement. As she walked back, she couldn't help but think, she always worried that the power supply in the device would run out, but the dog didn't have that problem. Couldn't the dog charge the power supply? The power supply had a charging port, and since the dog could charge the drone, it could also charge the power supply. After jumping back into the pit and crawling through the passage, the basement was now lit up. However, the incandescent lights flickered, looking like they were about to break at any moment. Luzin had already unplugged the main unit and monitor from the dog's back and plugged them into the basement's original power supply. The dog extended a data cable, connected it to the computer's port, and its dog eyes flashed red, as if it was working on cracking the password. This task was no challenge for the dog. When Yahweh walked up to the screen, she saw that the lock screen had changed, and the application icons were displayed. Password cracked. The dog was really useful. Yahweh couldn't help but feel this way. But then, she felt a bit confused. This sense of awe seemed like something Luzin would have. She had never felt this way before. Had she been infected by him? Yahweh couldn't tell whether this was a good thing or a bad thing. But the dog was indeed very useful. The desktop was simple, with only 5 icons: this PC, control panel, recycle bin, video, and audio. The control panel wasn't useful to Luzin, and the recycle bin was empty. Luzin opened this PC and checked it. It seemed to be the same as my computer. However, it was mostly empty. Inside, there were just program folders, but nothing else. Luzin then went to check video and found a list full of video files. He glanced through them, and they were all movies and TV shows, likely for entertainment purposes. These movies and TV shows seemed to have been stored in a hidden location, as they couldn't even be found in this PC. Luzin then opened audio, but instead of music or songs, there were timestamped files. A week of fun? Luzin frowned and opened the first timestamp file. The computer's built-in speakers played a voice: "We've lost signal here. I can only go to another shelter. But that shelter is too cold to rest. From today, I'll just go there to receive the signal and come back to rest. Also, we've run out of paper. After I receive messages, I'll try to memorize them and record them here. Sigh, I should have used the computer to record things earlier. Otherwise, there would still be paper available, and it would have been convenient at the shelter." Chapter 47, Loneliness and Hope. I hid the radio in that shelter. There are too many decadents outside. If I keep carrying the radio around, I'm afraid one day I'll run into trouble and get it snatched away by them. Still, I hope I never run into any raiders. Who knows if some of them have already gone completely mad. Like, turned into the kind that eats people? I was right to stick to my beliefs. I should be one of the rebuilders, not part of the hedonists, decadents, or adapters. But honestly, I haven't seen what the hedonists or adapters look like. Only the decadents. They live in this world like the Walking Dead, with no goals, no hope. Whether alone or in groups, all they know is looting and barely scraping by. The radio was right. They can't really be called human anymore. Only the rebuilders are the true hope of humanity. But to be honest, I've never seen a rebuilder either. I've only heard them on the radio. One day, I'll set off to find them. But not now. If I leave now, I'll die on the road. Voice recording ended. Luzin couldn't help frowning and turned to ask Yahweh, "Have you ever heard of these rebuilders, decadents, adapters, or hedonists?" Yahweh shook her head. No. Luzin looked at the time shown in the lower right corner of the computer screen, December 17, 2097. It was earlier than the timestamp on the recording. The computer probably didn't have access to updates anymore and had reverted to factory settings. So, on December 17, 2097, Maybe the world was still fine. No doomsday catastrophe yet. Then. What year is it now, do you know? Luzin asked Yahweh. Yahweh shook her head again and said, no. But my mom told me when I was little that the world's been like this for a long time. So long that no one can say exactly how many decades it's been. Decades, huh? For a world that changes this drastically, decades could mean mountains crumbling and seas drying up. It made sense that Yahweh wouldn't know what things were like back then. These labels dividing people into groups might have already been buried by time. Luzin kept his focus on the next timestamp and continued listening. Still no news today. I waited all day in the shelter, and the radio had nothing. I checked. The radio isn't broken, and it's on the right channel. That rebuilder's signal used to be on channel 78. I was afraid I'd forget, so I wrote the frequency down on paper. I left the paper in the shelter and double-checked it. No problem. I hope nothing happened to the rebuilders. Sigh. After listening to the May 3, 2100 recording, Luzin couldn't help but sigh. That so-called rebuilder group had become the only hope for the former owner of this shelter. To place all your hope in an organization you've never seen, only heard about through a voice. That kind of loneliness. Luzin didn't even want to imagine. What if this rebuilder group was just a radio scam? What would happen to this person? He kept listening. It's gotten cold again. I can't even remember when it started, but it felt like that endless winter had finally passed. I barely made it through and thought maybe the world was finally getting better. Didn't expect the cold waves would still hit from time to time. It's killer. It was too cold to go out today. I had to wrap myself in a blanket and hide in here. No idea how I even made it through back then. The radio should be fine. That shelter is on the cliff outside Gyoming Road. Regular folks wouldn't find it. The decadents just run around looking for food and stuff to steal. They'd never go somewhere that remote. Even if they did, they wouldn't find it. Sigh. I guess the heavens really are looking out for me. Before the catastrophe, for some weird reason, I decided to dig out an outdoor shelter up there for fun. Now look. It turned into a proper shelter. Too bad it's still too basic to stay there for good. Still, lucky I had that hobby. If I hadn't built that shelter, I probably would have turned into a decadent too. So that shelter was built by the owner of this two-story building before the apocalypse, just for fun. Was this person a doomsday survival enthusiast? After listening to this part of the recording, Luzin thought, seriously, this person was incredibly lucky. A former hobby became their lifeline. Too bad the place was just too small. Nothing like that big shelter under Jianghu Reservoir, built specifically for the apocalypse. Still cold today. Can't even sit on the toilet. It's freezing and my butt hurts. Still can't figure out how I made it through the first time. Hope this cold wave doesn't last too long. This was the second time this person said they didn't know how they made it through. May 6, 2100 The cold wave has passed. I went to the shelter, and the radio finally picked up new news from the rebuilders. They actually revealed their location in the broadcast. I can picture it now. They must have a lot of people, and a strong organization. Otherwise, how could they dare to expose their location like that? I've been hiding in this basement, being super careful every day. Even made fake camo for the metal door. Coming and going requires extra caution. I'm not going to say the location in the recording. Even though this recording is stored in this computer, which is totally safe. Still, I've decided not to say it. If one day I decide to leave, whatever info is saved in this computer won't matter. I've memorized the location perfectly. No way I'll forget it. That's where this segment ends. Luzin hovered his mouse over the timestamp of the last recording, wondering, what would this final one say? There were no more recordings after that. Did this person finally set off to find the rebuilders? Or did something happen to them? Click. Mouse pressed. The last recording opened. May 7, 2100 I can't wait any longer. I'm leaving right now. I've already packed everything. Food, clothes, and a bunch of books I went to the library to collect, all of which should help with post-apocalyptic rebuilding. I went there on purpose back then, before the library got taken over by the decadents. Decadents don't care if books are useful. But I thought of it. That's why I was born to be a rebuilder. I should be with them. I'm going to find them. Can't bring the radio. A group of decadents has taken over the path halfway, and there's no way around them. But it's fine. I'll just leave it at the shelter. The rebuilders are already openly broadcasting their location. They're not afraid of being exposed. What if someone else stumbles into the shelter, hears the broadcast, and awakens as a rebuilder too? That would actually be a good thing. Alright, that's the end of the recording. Today is May 7th, 2100. The third year after the catastrophe. I, Fang Shuxin of the Rebuilders, am leaving now, Heading to the Rebuilder base. Chapter 48, The Rebuilders broadcast. There was nothing else on the computer. Luzin had checked, then shut it down. He let out a sigh and asked Yao Wei, "Do you think Feng Shuxin found the Rebuilders?" "Don't know." Yao Wei shook her head again, not actually interested in the question. She had never heard of any Rebuilders growing up. She had been all over the place. East, west, south, north. And never seen anything like that. This so-called Rebuilder group was probably already buried in the dust of history. Thinking about it now. "What's the point?" Luzin said, "Actually, if you think about it, that Luoping guy kind of fits the vibe of a Rebuilder. He even has a secret base. Do you think he might be carrying on the same legacy?" "Don't know." Yao Wei shook her head again. "Doesn't matter if he is or isn't. He is basically the Rebuilders now anyway, isn't he?" Luzin looked at Yao Wei, a little surprised. He hadn't expected this woman to say something like that. Yao Wei looked a bit embarrassed under his gaze and turned away, avoiding eye contact. "What are you looking at?" Usually expressionless and aloof, she was suddenly flustered. Gave her a bit of that shy girl vibe, kind of cute actually. "Nothing." Luzin chuckled. Not wanting to make her uncomfortable, he stopped staring. He said, "If Luoping is a Rebuilder, then us helping him find teammates basically makes us the Rebuilders broadcast." Yao Wei agreed with that take. She saw Luzin wasn't looking at her anymore and finally breathed a sigh of relief. "Let's go. There's nothing left here. No point staying," Luzin said. Yao Wei responded again. They didn't use the ladder in the corner. They stepped into the tunnel, hunched over as they passed through, then straightened up and jumped out of the entrance. That guy probably left the same way when he set off. Not using the ladder was probably intentional. Didn't want others getting down there too easily. He'd even disguised the metal door before leaving. No wonder no one had discovered this place all this time. Luzin looked back down, thinking, I wonder if Feng Shuxin was a new human. Could he jump straight up like me and Yao Wei? If not, he must have worked hard climbing out. Speaking of new humans. Yao Wei, what type of new human do you think we are? He asked. According to Luoping, there's more than one kind of new human. Type B new humans can fully revive by eating. So what about the other types? How many types of new humans are there in the world? And how did new humans come about? Before the catastrophe? After it? Were they mutated naturally, or was there human intervention? Luzin was a little annoyed with himself. Why didn't he stop Luoping back then and ask more questions about this stuff? That guy probably knows quite a bit. Don't know. Yao Wei shook her head again. Her three-word answer didn't surprise Luzin at all. She went back inside to grab the power bank from the stairs, and Luzin followed to take a final look, confirming there was no point exploring further. He said, let's head out. Yao Wei agreed, but her eyes were on Dogsy. She looked at Dogsy, then at the power bank in her hand. Luzin didn't even need to ask. He already knew what she was thinking. Once we're in the car, have Dogsy charge the power bank. Luzin said. Yao Wei nodded and said to Luzin, thanks. Luzin smiled. Come on, what's with the thanks between us? No need to be polite. No need. Yao Wei replied, and the corners of her lips lifted into an unintentional smile. They got into the car and put their things away. Luzin took the power bank from Yao Wei and had Dogsy open its power port and connect it. Luzin started the car and asked, should we go look for Feng Shuxin's other shelter? I'm curious if, after all this time, anyone out there is still broadcasting. I'll take a look. Yao Wei pulled out World Atlas I, flipped to the page for Mengxin City, and marked the spot for Eternal Heaven Petrochemical Gas Station with a pen. Watching her, Luzin suddenly had a thought and said, actually, Dogsy can make markers too. It doesn't have a map, but it can record explored locations. Once a marker is set, it can lead me back there later. I had it mark a spot before. Wanhikun in Dongmen County, up north. But later we kept heading south, and I figured we'd never go back, so I stopped using that feature. I pretty much forgot about it. Yao Wei looked back at Dogsy. Dogsy was currently charging her power bank and was temporarily idle. Luzin said, once it's done charging, I'll have it mark the spot too. Yao Wei responded, then went back to studying World Atlas I. She flipped back a page and finally found Kaiuming Road. Kaiuming Road isn't in Mengxin City. It's a nearby city. It's a mountain road. There's a place called Hongnai Village at the entrance. No way around it. If we want to go, we'll have to go through Hongnai Village. Luzin thought for a moment and said, let's check it out. It's been decades. Everything's changed. Who knows if those so-called decadents that used to occupy the place are still around. Yao Wei agreed. One hand holding the map, the other holding her gun, she gave Luzin directions while keeping watch. Outside of Hongnai Village, Luzin had Dogsy stop charging the power bank and sent the drone to scout the area. The village was completely empty. Rows of houses had collapsed. None were intact. Just as expected, the decadents who once roamed here were long gone. What do you think Feng Shuxin and the rebuilders meant by decadents back then, exactly? As they drove through the ruins of Hongnai village, Luzin asked. Yao Wei thought for a moment and replied, probably meant people like the ones we see nowadays. Luzin nodded. That's what I thought too. Luo Ping used to call them all decadents. Say, we don't produce anything either, just keep looking for oases. Does that make us decadents too? Yao Wei shook her head again and said, no. You already said it. We're the rebuilders broadcast. Luzin laughed. Right. We're the rebuilders broadcast. The car drove through Hongnai village and up another winding mountain road in Yubai city. Luzin had Dogsy release the drone again, piloting it to follow the car along the cliffs, helping them search for Feng Shuxin's former shelter. Chapter 49, Cliffside Shelter. Luzin figured the shelter couldn't be too far away. In the recording, Feng Shuxin had said that he originally dug the shelter just for fun, never expecting it would actually come in handy one day. So, there was no reason for Feng Shuxin to have gone too far. Plus, judging by the mountain road's direction after entering the hills, if it had been too far, the cliffs beyond the road would only get steeper. That would have made it dangerous and hard to dig. Just as he expected, the drone hadn't flown far off the road before it hovered midair. Inside the car, the mechanical dog's eyes lit up. Luzin hit the brakes and stopped. He got out of the car with Yao Wei, and they walked to the edge of the road. There was a railing built along the cliff edge. Wild grass had overgrown the road and tangled messily around the railing. The two of them cleared the grass from the railing, pushed aside the wild overgrowth, and held onto the railing to look down. The cliff wall here wasn't extremely high, but it wasn't short either. About the height of a two-story building. In the middle of the cliff wall was a cave entrance. Luzin and Yao Wei vaguely saw tiny ceramic tiles stuck around the entrance's edge. A bamboo curtain hung in a diamond shape to one side of the opening. The bamboo slats were sparse, like many had been removed. Luzin could tell that used to be the curtain hanging at the cave entrance, acting as a door. The rope holding it up had broken over time from neglect and weathering, leaving it like this. Didn't expect the shelter to be dug right into the cliff wall. No wonder Feng Shuxin said dug in the recording, Luzin remarked, looking at the cave. The bottom of the entrance was more than 2 meters above the ground. Climbing up or down the cliff was no easy task. If this shelter was dug before the Doomsday even began, then it was clear Feng Shuxin really had a passion for building shelters. Digging into this kind of spot wasn't easy. Yeah. Yao Wei nodded in agreement. But what she understood was slightly different from Luzin. She was thinking about those old-world humans. She'd never seen a natural human's original appearance, only knew that in the old world, there were no new humans. Looking at those who aged quickly and had so many survival issues in the old world. Doing such a massive project must have been insanely difficult. Yao Wei couldn't help but feel some admiration. You wait here. I'll go down and take a look, Luzin said. Yao Wei just gave another, without objecting. She understood that in situations like this, someone had to stay with the car to keep watch. Both to cover Luzin and to guard the vehicle. There was nothing blocking the road in either direction. Unlike earlier, when they could park in the corner behind the gas station building, now they had no cover and had to leave the car out in the open. If both of them went down and someone came by and spotted the car, that would be trouble. She held her handgun in her hand and kept watch by the car. Meanwhile, Luzin was already climbing down the cliff. There had probably been a rope ladder hanging from the top. Luzin found a knotted rope at the base of one railing post. Now brittle and deformed from being crushed by wild grass. But it was only a knot. Luzin guessed Feng Shuxin must have cut the rope ladder when he left, so no one could use it to follow him in. No rope ladder? No problem for Luzin. He grabbed an axe and held it firmly, swung himself over the railing, and hacked the axe into the cliff wall to hang from it. Too bad the soil wasn't loose enough. If it were,